So welcome everyone to another episode of Restore Black Soul Go podcast. And today I'm thrilled to welcome Professor Mojisola Adebayo, a proclaimed, well-known playwright in her own right, and she's a performer, she's a director and a lecturer. She holds a BA in drama and theatre arts and an MA in physical theatre, and a PhD with the groundbreaking thesis entitled Afriqueer, which is about theatre creating Black queer Ubuntu through performance. Mojisola brings to us over 25 years of experience with her work that's gone international. An expert in the theatre of the oppressed, trained under Augusta Boal, she has performed and led workshops across continents, addressing audience in diverse and challenging contexts. Her acclaimed plays include Moj of Antarctica, An African Odyssey, Muhammad Ali and Me, and The Interrogation of Sandra Bland, which won the Off West End Theatre Awards for Best New Play of 2023. Now, notably, Mojisola's powerful work, Family Tree, also received the prestigious Alfred Fagan Award in 2021. And that is the play that introduced me to the person I'll be interviewing today, and we'll hear more about that. So in this episode, Mojisola and I will discuss her impactful work, and we're going to delve into themes of mental health and explore some of her own struggles and how her work or how her own struggles has impacted her work. So join me as we talk together in tonight's program. And I just want to say once again, Mojisola, thank you for coming on tonight. And just for the audience, this is the first time that we've met.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Yes, and this is the first time we're actually speaking.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I mentioned Family Tree, and I'll talk more about that as we go through. But it was seeing this play and hearing you at the opening night in Bristol. So I watched the play and I was gripped, and that was impactful. And I said, you know what? This is an individual I'd love to sit and talk with. And I'm so pleased that you're here today through a good friend of mine who knew somebody who sent my email. And audience, just one email, and Mojisola emailed me back and said she'd be delighted. So I want to say thank you for that. So you get this email from me, and you said yes. Why yes? Why did you say yes?
You know what? I said yes because you were so gracious in the way that you wrote to me. And that was one thing.
Thank you.
And also Restore Black, that in those two words, there's hundreds of years of healing and hundreds of years of possibility from the past for the future.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I don't like to say no, and that's probably a challenge for me, but certainly the opportunity, to speak to another Black person in the context of Black healing, I think is a must. That's I made a decision a few years ago that's what my life is about, really.
Right. Yeah.
So the purpose of your podcast, your programs, and your work, really synergizes with mine. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And Restore Black, as is about when we think of who we once were, we were pharaohs, queens, architects, owner of all that we see. And then slavery came in and tried to tell us that we are less than, and it got into our psyche. And we started to live out what we were told we are and who we're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the role of Restore Black is to restore. Let's restore and remember from whence we've come and who we are and whose we are. So, hence the reason Restore Black. But thank you for that. I really appreciate it. So, let's go to some questions about your work. If you can tell me then how, if we think about your training, for example, under Augustus Boal, which is quite impressive, and the theatre of the oppressed. And when I look at your work and what I've read about you, there's a lot dealing with the oppressed. You bring that throughout your work. So can you say more about that, about the influence of the theatre of oppress, and probably break it down for us what it means? And I like what I've read about it, about getting the audience to be participants. So could you say more about that and how it influences your work?
Sure. Well, I was really blessed to have the opportunity to meet Auguste Boal back in the early 90s. And it was funny, I had just read his book, Theatre of the Oppressed. And I did, and then a couple of weeks later, he came and he offered a free training course where I was studying at the time when I was on a little break in Dublin, in Ireland. And it really blew my mind because I hadn't really, I'd got into theatre by accident, really. Performance I'd always been interested in, and music in particular. But theatre I found pretty exclusive, pretty classist, sexist, racist sometimes. And I just fell into it. I got given a place on a course, I got kicked off another university course, and I just fell into theatre. And so I was kind of disillusioned with it, really. And it just didn't seem to speak to some of the concerns that, in the 90s, I was, studying in Southeast London at Goldsmiths, and it seemed so removed from what was happening out on the street. And then I took this break and I was in Dublin and I met Auguste Boal, and that really shifted my kind of thinking, because it's a collection of games and exercises and different theatre techniques, and like you said, participatory kind of ways of making theatre that really comes from the people and whatever people want to debate and find solutions to in their communities, in their contexts. And so it's a very useful kind of form of theatre where literally an audience member can come up on stage and try and change the story. And I did a lot of that kind of work in communities back in London and also different parts of the world, in Palestine, in South Africa, in India, different places.
Yeah.
But it's still that idea is very much influenced all of my work. And although Auguste himself was a very privileged Brazilian of Portuguese heritage, when you really look into the history of theatre of the oppressed, it's very, very much come from Black people, Indigenous people who have formed those practices.
Yeah.
And then the more I studied it, like I met this theatre director from Burkina Faso, a country in Africa, who said, we were doing theatre of the oppressed for thousands of years in Africa. And then we met a man called Auguste Boal who invented it. And so it was his name is Prosper Campoere. He was joking, he was a friend of Boal's, and he was joking, saying, actually, the idea of people using theatre to explore the concerns of our communities and to find solutions within our communities is as old as theatre itself. And the origin of humanity is Africa, so the origin of theatre is Africa.
There we go. Restore Black. Let's remember that. So thank you for that. Now let's just go a bit deeper and if we can think about or share with the audience what it means, because there is being a spectator and then being a spectator. So what my understanding is that the actors are on stage and they are acting out a role, and then an audience member can come up and decide. Am I saying that correctly? Perhaps you can say it better than me.
Yeah. So so for example, like an issue may be raised within a community. For example, racial discrimination in the workplace, for example. I remember one show I saw from Portugal of that theme.
Yeah.
And you might have a kind of central character who's trying to deal with this problem, but they're not able to succeed in dealing with this problem. They're really oppressed. Their power is being used against them. And so you see the play once through, and the audience should really be an audience that resonates with that subject, that cares about, that is in that position too. And so you present the play once, and then you have a kind of conversation about it, and then you present the play a second time around. And there's a kind of facilitator who holds the space. But the second time around, any member of the audience can say stop during the action. They're welcomed up on stage. They change the place of the central character, and they show what they might do in that situation to try and to deal with the problem and to try and find solutions. And as many people can come up as possible. So it's like an active debate, and it's really great.
Yeah. And it's also a good way of trying to understand what it feels like to be in the other person's shoes.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Really good way of, and I like how, from Africa, how they would debate and come to solutions about a topic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So considering some of the issues you have tackled in the theatre of the oppressed, and you continue to tackle, I'm curious on the theatre's role, how you see theatres, how they handle trauma or mental health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in terms of theatre of the oppressed, it's usually very much about those kind of external issues that you can see and deal with, those kinds of power relations. But there's also a part of theatre of the oppressed which is also about the ways in which those external forces become internalized. And how we can deal with those problems. And there's different kinds of theatre techniques to deal with those. And that's been something of an influence as well in my work, how theatre can be a space to really talk safely about things that we might find really, really difficult to talk about, through a character, through other people.
Yes.
And to empathize with them and to open up that space of possibility to reflect on our own lives as well.
So let me ask you, so the intersection then between education, entertainment, and healing, when dealing with such themes, how do you find that?
Yeah, I think I think so much theatre has kind of lost its way in that I think that's always what it was for, to entertain people, to give people a good time, but also to teach, but also to be a space of healing and Ubuntu, which is one of the things I wrote about in my thesis, that theatre can be a space where we see ourselves reflected, that we see ourselves in others, we understand our humanity through the other, a bit like psychotherapy, really. And I think it's no accident that theatre and therapy, the origins of those words come from the same. That it's a talking space.
Yes. And talking about psychotherapy, what I'm trying to do is where therapy or psychotherapy meets the arts. And a part of Restore Black is doing podcasts like this and then having live therapy sessions on stage. Wow. So in order to help us as individuals, especially within the Black community, start to think seriously about our mental health. And because and I do that with high profile guests like yourself, because if somebody can see somebody like yourself on stage willing to share their own experience, then hopefully, even if it's just one member of the audience or the listening audience, can say, well, if they can do it, so can I. Because they see us, they see celebrities, don't they? Or people as if we have no difficulties, as if I'm saying we, but, as if they have no difficulties. And I think for individuals like you to be vulnerable, to be willing to be vulnerable in front of an audience and on a podcast like this, I think it will go a long way for us as individuals to start really thinking about our mental health and the reasons behind it. We think of racism, as you've mentioned today, and I think that's what you're also doing through your own work.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. And it's funny being back in this bathroom. I'm in a bathroom at the moment. And like I said, it's the only quiet space in the house in the evening.
Yeah.
The apartment.
Yeah.
But it's also a space, because it's the only quiet space. I would have my therapy in this room, in this seat here in the bathroom. During COVID, and I've had therapy for around 12 years now. Around 12 years, on a bit of a pause, and I've seen lots of different therapists over time, but then and I never ever thought I would be in that kind of talking relationship, that kind of exchange with a therapist for so long. I never imagined that.
Yes.
But it's certainly one of the things, that has got me through, really, and given me strength, and theatre. I think and I'm a survivor of many different kinds of abuse, and I think if without the arts and without therapy and friendship, that those are the three things that have restored me. So I think it's very, very powerful what you're doing. I think
thank you. The word restore, I've taken it from, because my private practice is also called Restore Psychotherapy. So that's what I do with my practice. And that word restore is so important for me. It's taken from the 23rd Psalm. He restores my soul. And it was a rabbi who I heard talking about that verse, saying, wherever in your life you have been broken, whether it's childhood, adolescence, adulthood, God will go back to those places and collect those broken pieces and help you to become whole again. And that's how I see the work of therapy. It's as clients come in and sit with me and I ask, what happened? For them to start finding those pieces within themselves that's been lost. A lot of clients says they just feel lost or they feel stuck. So then through our work together, we, help them to find those pieces and what was it that caused that brokenness or the sense of loss. Yeah. So how was it for you going to therapy for the first time, when you first went to therapy? Because it can be a frightening experience.
It's so long ago now that and the therapist that I've been working with for the last 12 years wasn't my first therapist, and it was a little struggle at the beginning to find the right person to talk to. And I say it's fine, when one's first going to therapy, to just try someone else, see if it see how you feel. And I do remember having an assessment all those years ago, and it was I think it was a black man that assessed me. I can't remember now, and he said to me, asked me about gender, which gender a person I would want to speak to. And I said, oh, a woman. And then I thought to myself, you know what? Let's be open. You never know. I said, you know what? Actually, let's just see. You see, and I just decided to just let that person assess me and think, okay, let's see, maybe. And I was surprised that I would never imagine that I've had a male therapist for 12 years, and that actually there was something, I don't know why, but it's different for everybody, but for me, maybe a little bit of that distance helped me. I don't know why. So I think so with that person, as soon as they walked into the room, I just knew, I can talk to this person. I feel safe.
Yeah.
I feel safe with this person. I feel all right. And we're from two different worlds, we're not the same background, we're not the same gender. But it was cool, and that person's amazing. And but I think, that's, I suppose, what I'd say to anybody thinking about having therapies is it's okay to try someone out and just see how you feel. and and you'll know if it's the right dynamic.
Yeah.
Also to stay open to the possibility that perhaps somebody who's not necessarily who you would imagine talking to can actually be someone else who really connects with you.
Yeah, thank you. That's very encouraging. I think that'd be very encouraging for our listening audience. So let's go to the play, Family Tree. That's how this reason why behind how we're talking today. And so I went to see Family Tree in Bristol. It was my supervisor, actually, who told me about the play. And I sort of, okay, I went. And I didn't look it up because I just wanted to go into a place where it's fresh and not knowing. And I sat there watching and listening, and I was gripped. And when the play finished, I sat there, I couldn't move for a while. I just sat there having to take everything in. And then I left and I started to tell work colleagues about it, went on WhatsApp and told people about, you've got to go and see this play. It's in Bristol just till the end of the week. And I had to go back and see it again 2 days later. That's because it hit me, and that's what I need to go and see it again because I have to work through some stuff that how it impacted me. And so with that, other individuals came, colleagues came, and just amazing. And as I said, I wanted to talk with you because of Henrietta Lacks, and I must admit that was the first time I heard her story and how her cells still live in today, and how once again, how her cells were taken from her without family knowing and being used and making millions for pharmaceutical companies and so forth and so on. And the family had no idea about this. So I wonder if you can take over now. And what was it like for you writing that play and your own emotions, what you went through in writing it and accomplishing such a fantastic piece of work?
Yeah, thank you so much for going to see the play and for all your praise and your words and your support. And it's a real honor, actually, to be one of the people who's been sharing the story of Henrietta Lacks, the true story of Henrietta Lacks. And if I've done anything, well, it's in service of her and her legacy. That's what brings me joy. Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know about Henrietta Lacks, she was an African-American woman who died at the age of 31 in 1951 of a very aggressive form of cancer. She was a mother. She was descended from tobacco farmers in Baltimore, Maryland, and sadly, cancer took her life. Well, her life as we know it, life as we expect it, when she was very young. But as you say, that happened to a lot of people, and especially a lot of people of African heritage, Black people. Cells were taken from her body without her knowledge, and were taken from her cancer actually without her knowledge and without the knowledge of her family or her children. And this was widespread, this practice. It was in Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, very famous hospital. And she was placed on the so-called colored ward, and her cells were taken. And the idea that they were taking cells from people's bodies because they were actually trying to find the key to everlasting life and trying to find the cure for cancer and these kind of things. And they were taking cells and trying to find cells that would survive outside of the human body. And nobody, not one single scientist or doctor, can tell you why to this day. Nobody knows why, but Henrietta Lacks' cells dividing and multiplying outside of her body. and the most powerful cells in human history, in every single laboratory in the world, which is every city in the world, every major capital city in the world, which has a laboratory, has Henrietta Lacks' cells. Yes. Every medicine,
including the UK.
Including the UK, they're all over the UK. They're all over the world, and every medicine that you or I have ever taken, every vaccine, just about everything is tested.
Including COVID.
Including COVID, vaccine, everything. And so much, so many medicines and cures have been developed through her cells. Like the polio vaccine was developed through her cells. A lot of IVF testing, that we know about chromosomes and Down syndrome and Parkinson's disease, HIV, you name it.
Yeah.
Without
polio,
her, all kinds of things, absolutely. And without her cells, so much of this medical knowledge would not have been discovered in the way and in the time frame that we know it in the last 70 years. So her cells are still dividing now. They're dividing as we speak. They're so powerful that you can't keep other human cells in the vicinity of Henrietta Lacks' cells, because she clones those cells and they become her cells. So they're the most powerful cells in human history. And of course, when the doctors discovered these cells, what did these white doctors of European descent in America do? Well, they tried to pretend that she wasn't a Black woman. They changed the name of the cells. So the cells were named after the first two letters of her first name and her surname, Henrietta Lacks. They're called the HeLa cells. And they tried to say her name was actually Helen Larson, and sometimes they called her Helen Lane to make her sound more European.
Yeah.
And they hid all of this, and they not only did they take her cells, use her cells, but they sold her cells.
Yeah.
So they are a $1 trillion industry. Anyone listening to this call can go online right now and buy Henrietta Lacks' cells and have them delivered.
Right. And I would also say go and get the book. I've listened to one book already from her. I think it was her grandson. He's written something about it, and now this other book that I'm halfway through. But back then, so 1951 is when she died, and they started to use her cells. And one of the things that I read was that they were charging $25 at the time a vial, and a vial is about that big, isn't it? $25. And where was it? Let me see. I'll read something here that tells you about her cells. If I put my glasses on, it says here that there's no way of knowing exactly how many of Henrietta's cells are alive today. One scientist estimates that if you could pile all HeLa cells ever grown onto a scale, they'd weigh more than 50 million metric tons, which is inconceivable. And then another scientist calculated that if you could lay all HeLa cells ever grown from end to end, they would wrap around the earth at least 3 times, spanning more than 35 million feet. That's how powerful her cells are. And as you said, they're still growing today.
Absolutely.
They're growing today.
And when one thinks about the marvel that one thinks about that, one thinks, well, my goodness, what we define as a deity, as a god, goddess, is, God is omnipresent, God is everywhere, inside of us, outside of us, powerful, healing, and never be destroyed. And I'm not saying that Henrietta Lacks is a god. I'm not, I'm not saying that. But it does tell us that, lead to the question of why, when one Black woman has given so much to planet, to the human beings. Why was she not acknowledged, name changed, hidden, lies about her, and also that her own family were not even told, and why they lived in relative poverty and were not able to pay their own medical bills. And so it seems to me that it's more than a symbol, it's a reality, but it also symbolizes for me the extraction from Black life, the taking from Black life, and the lack of acknowledgement of what Black life gives to the planet.
Yes.
And so, and that trauma, actually, that
absolutely
trauma, that we are dealing with, it's in many other kinds of ways. So at the heart of the play is about extraction, and in particular extraction from Black women's bodies. But I never like to write just a single issue play. Like, I didn't want to just write a kind of biopic about Henrietta Lacks. It's also been done, right? There's a film of the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot, and other people can do that thing way better than I can. But I'm much more, I suppose, poetic, and I wanted to imagine what Henrietta Lacks was saying to us from the petri dish, like imagining what her cells were saying right now, and imagining where her spirit might be trying to find itself. So I was thinking about her, and then I was thinking about all the other kinds of women who've been extracted from, which led me to thinking about extraction from Black women's bodies during gynecological experiments on enslaved women. And I was writing it during the COVID lockdown, and I was also thinking and very angry about the lack of acknowledgement of extraction of labor, of work from Black and brown bodies during that time, and the lack of acknowledgement of that people were given their lives. So that's why there's all these different stories woven in. Not just Henrietta Lacks is very much the center of it, but also Anarcha, Betsy and Lucy, who were experimented on during gynecological experiments, and also Ain Bibi and Lynn, who are kind of fictional characters, but very much informed by real women serving in the NHS during COVID. So all of those stories are woven in, and these women are just kind of wandering through a garden, trying to figure out where they are, why they are, what they're doing there.
So let me ask you, so how do you think, then, carrying on from that the themes that's presented in Family Tree, how they reflect the broader issues of today when we think about race, identity, and health in the Black community?
Yeah, I think one of them is obviously through Henrietta Lacks, the lack of acknowledgement of the sheer gift of life that Blackness has given to the planet, that we come from.
Absolutely,
we come from the same source. And Henrietta Lacks reminds us of that. And so there's something, I'm smiling because there's something very, very magical about that. That the power, I don't mean magical in a kind of fairy tale, but magical in a real, the power of Black life, the power, the potential of Black life, the healing force, that's beyond the body, beyond time as we know it, that if these human cells can be divided as we speak, that we have a massive capacity more than we know. So there's something very positive about that. I think that can speak to us as well, and that speaks to me in terms of, that gives me great hope for healing, that we can go beyond, that we can never be contained.
I love that, we can never be contained into a vial.
Absolutely.
And
her cells change everything. Everything that they come into contact with become her cells, literally become her cells. They give so much that, there's so much learned through them. And at the same time, there's that tragedy, the cruelty. I remember speaking to one scientist who said to me, this is just a really accidental conversation by somebody I met very casually,
Mm-hmm.
who said, oh, I work with the cells all the time. Do you want to see them? And I was like, wow. And this person said to me, yeah, they're the workhorse of our, they're the workhorse. And I will never forget that phrase, workhorse.
Yeah.
That even though she gives all of this, she's described as a workhorse.
Yeah.
For cells, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
There you go. There's that dehumanization right there. And I know that that person wasn't meaning any harm, but it said a lot to me. And so that also leads me to think about the kind of the brutality of healthcare as well, what's supposedly care. How, that repeated thing of our pain not being listened to, of, Black women being 5 times more likely.
That's right. To die in childbirth, yes.
Die in childbirth. And our pain not being acknowledged, our pain, and just that statistic that there isn't a kind of huge government funding to try and find out how we can change that there isn't an emergency in that. And also things like fibroids and stuff that so many Black women deal with, to sickle cell anemia, to and just my own experience of healthcare, of just of racism, literally on the operating table. Yeah. I had a racist comment on the operating table before I was going under for surgery. This shouldn't make anyone be afraid, and heart surgery as well. Shouldn't make anyone be afraid to have surgery, but it's that that when we are at our most vulnerable, it can be in those moments that we are most racialized, and that there is an attempt to dehumanize us, and that has a very long history. And really healthcare, is, and also women's maternal healthcare is at the absolute heart of slavery, because slavery was about production, producing tobacco and sugar and cotton and blah, blah, blah.
Which was what Henrietta was doing too, wasn't she?
Yeah, it's descendant from tobacco farm.
Yeah, I have.
So if you don't have production, then you don't have all of those products. And where does the production come from? Black women's bodies. So we have to address that core pain and heal from that. And justice. It's also about justice in healthcare.
And when we think about, as you just said, about we need to heal from that, my mind straight went back again to Henrietta Lacks, the healer cells. Healer. She is healing, helping to find cures. And yet that acknowledgement, they couldn't acknowledge that such a great thing would come from a person of color, a Black woman at that, and then hide it from her family. And I know it was by chance that her family heard about it, and her family were struggling, couldn't afford healthcare. And this was happening. But I'd like us to think about, if I can switch it a bit, because as you know, as a psychotherapist, I want to be able to talk to you now about, love to hear your thoughts about how your own struggles has led you to create these beautiful artworks of plays that you do. And because in my profession, we're known as the wounded healers. And we come to this profession because of our own pain, and the results of that sense of healing and freedom that we want to be able to help others go through their own healing. So when I hear about you working with the theatre of the oppressed, and so can you share some of your early upbringings, your family life growing up, mum and dad, and relationships and stuff? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I come from a really beautiful family of many extended family of many cousins. The Adebayo family, of which I love, and I suppose I want to start that way around, thinking more about the extended family,
sure,
as well as my brother and many people that I really, really love. So, and I hold them up, and I hold on to that, that there was more, I suppose, than what was happening in that very tiny nuclear family that I was my experience. But in terms of that, in terms of the kind of beyond the extended family, in terms of that, the center of the family, in terms of my parents, it was a very, very traumatic childhood. There was a lot of violence, which I witnessed, and I was also fostered the first 5 years of my life, and there was also sexual violence there. Yeah, and neglect, I'd say, as well. And then eventually everything shifted when my parents broke up, and but then I'd say I survived other kinds of difficulties in terms of the use of alcohol in the family home, and yeah, it was a very, very painful childhood. And I left home when I was 18. I didn't need to leave home. I went to university very close to my home, actually, but I decided to move far, even though I could have just walked to college, really, from where I grew up in South East London. And so getting into theatre, and I was also in the church for a long time, so that, I think, while some of it was very, very problematic, it also gave me a safer space than I found at home, and gave me some kind of codes for living, some boundaries that I didn't really have for myself. It gave me boundaries, and healing to a certain extent, the possibility of love, that God is love, that stayed with me. And then, yeah, just getting into theatre, theatre of the oppressed, as you say, and then starting to see how the possibility of using theatre within communities and within groups like that I've been through, like with young people, survivors, children in care, homeless people, people with addiction issues, etc. So yeah, I was able to kind of see how theatre could make sense of some of what I'd been through. And then years later, I kind of got quite tired, a bit burnt out by doing theatre in communities and doing lots of action work and that kind of thing. And then I thought, I came up with this, I did my master's, and I wanted to focus on this person that I came, there's a theme here in terms of historical figures, this person called Ellen Craft, who cross-dressed as a white man to escape slavery. And she was an African-American woman, again, in the mid-19th century, and she did it, she got away with it. And my focus of my MA was on, at the end, my master's thesis was on how Black historical figures have used performance outside of the realms of performance. So even though she wasn't an actress, it was the most astonishing performance for a Black woman to pass as a white man during enslavement and to get away with it. And that, when I was researching that subject, I came across her, and also I started very much focusing on Muhammad Ali and the way that he did dance, basically jazz steps in the boxing ring, shuffled his feet. So he was using what we might consider performance skill side of the realms of a performance skill. He did magic tricks, he rapped, poetry. He was an all-round entertainer, but yet he was a boxer. So I focused on Muhammad Ali. But then a friend said to me, I remember sending a draft script to a friend, and they said to me, yeah, Muhammad Ali, yeah, but we know all about Muhammad Ali. What about you? Like, why are you interested in Muhammad Ali? And that led to the piece Muhammad Ali and Me, which is a semi-autobiographical piece, which partly looks, I fictionalized some of my childhood and looks at some of the trauma of my childhood. And it was through that piece that I was able to kind of process a lot of what I'd been through And so it's a kind of coming of age story. Muhammad Ali is kind of coming of age as an activist and coming out as a Muslim, and the child based on myself, Mojisola, what's the name of it, is kind of is growing up, coming out of coming out of care, coming out as queer, and becoming a performer herself. So it's a kind of coming of age kind of play, and that's what really kind of launched I don't think launched, but gave me a space to really process what I've been through.
Yes, and that's what I was just about to say. It's the sense of healing through that. It brought you healing through doing that. Another way of, some people will do journal writing, and you went on to producing these amazing plays to, how you used your own struggles to catapult you really to who you are today. And it just goes to show, doesn't it, from what you've shared with us today, that regardless of our childhood, that you can still rise, you can, it makes us stronger in a sense, this defiance, this I can do attitude. And how sometimes pain can fuel what we do until we're ready to look at it face on and confront and start to heal, which is where the struggle starts, I think, with fighting with oneself in order to heal, because we have to look at some very painful things. We can no longer turn a blind eye or a deaf ear to what's happened or how certain things have made us feel inside.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to look at it. And be gentle with ourselves and allow ourselves to look at that, those painful parts, and to do that with others, do that in a therapeutic process, or to do that through art, music, whatever it is, poetry, journal writing, talking to friends.
Yes. And with what you shared, Mojisola, about, what would you say to us then, to women? I want you to speak to everybody, but for the moment, just speak to women. Because if we think about Henrietta Lacks, the extraction, you talk of the, extraction from women's bodies, and we're not told, we're not informed, we're not consulted, we're not seen, we're not heard. What would you say to women who are who'll be listening and watching this dialogue between you and me, about what we can do about our past, and how we can use that and how do we use it then to push us on? And what are the steps? How would you encourage us as women?
Yeah, so it's a lot in there.
Or even it's just one thing.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose as a storyteller, as a theatre maker, an encouragement, I suppose, to women would be that you are the author of your own life. And if you've been through oppressive situations, abuses, or just even if you've had the most fantastic childhood, fantastic life, wonderful supportive family, just be in the Black woman. And the challenge is that just to breathe, just to live, just to be. But sometimes it can feel that life has been written for you, and that other people are writing that script. And that the things, and that feeling of a lack of control actually over one's own destiny. But to know that that you are the author, no matter what has happened or what happens to you, that you are the author of your life, and that the way you tell it is also up to you, and that you can, no matter what happens to you, no one can control this. No one can control what's inside, and that you can write that the way you write it. So I'll give an example, a precise example. In my play Muhammad Ali and Me, um, the abuser, the sexual abuser, in that play, throws himself at one point. He is exposed for what he does, and he throws himself off Blackfriars Bridge. Blackfriars is the area I was fostered in South London, and he throws himself off Blackfriars Bridge. Now that man never threw himself off Blackfriars Bridge. He drove a taxi. You know, like he didn't do that. He actually lived quite a long life. But in my mind, that was incredible. It was amazing to say, you know what, in my play, I'm the author of that. It's my life. And in a sense, it's, you know, there's one thing for me that I write plays, that I had a very, very tangible, very practical way of doing that. I wrote it in the script that he throws himself off the bridge. But it was more, what that showed me is that inside, you don't need to be a playwright to do that. You don't need to be a theatre to do that. To say, actually, you know, I know what you did, but to me, you're not in mine. You don't control me, you don't own me, you don't, you know, you have disappeared from me. It doesn't mean you deny the reality of it or anything, but that I am somehow in control of that, you know, that I have agency in that, and that I'm not stuck in the child, so, you know, that you know, so there's something, I'm not articulating it so well, but I suppose for the listeners is to know that you can rewrite things. You can, you know, and with my play Stars, which just a tiny thing, that's the play that won the off West End Theatre Awards, and it's coming back, Stars.
Coming back, great.
Yeah. So it's a tiny little play. It's come back to, it toured last year, it toured in 2023 alongside Family Tree, and now it's coming back. It's coming to Brixton House. It's Tamasha Theatre Company. It's coming in June.
Coming in June, so
yeah, look at Stars.
In June, Stars in June, yes.
This year, but that for that play as well, that like all the trauma that this old woman has gone through in her life, it's an elderly Black woman, but she wants to go into space. She's decided she's going into space, and I won't give the story away, but you know, you can say that that's impossible.
Yeah.
But no one can write what's going on in here.
Is this the play about the orgasm?
Yeah. She goes into space in search of her own orgasm. Well, she's never had one. She's in her 80s.
Yeah.
And she's like, wow, but everybody says I see stars, and everybody, you know, says it was out of this world. Well, she's got it into her husband's died. It was a horrendous marriage. And she's like, what's all this business about? I want to have some of that.
So you're never too late.
It's never too late, yeah. And, you know, for imagination, for rewriting your own life, for recostuming yourself, that beautiful setting that you're in right there, you created that setting. Yeah. You know, we can create the setting, the costume, the makeup, the story. Nobody, and if we've got no money, no nothing, nobody can write what's going on in here. We can do that in relationship with each other as well. We can, in therapy, in dialogue, or just with friendships, rewrite, or just with oneself, rewrite what that is and who we are. Nobody can control that.
You said Stars is coming back. Will Henrietta, the immortal selves of Henrietta Lacks, come back to the stage?
I'd love that. Family Tree, yeah. I would love somebody to put it on again. But well, yeah, I don't have any control over that. I can fantasize about it.
Yes. Okay, that's great. So one more question. How do you now, I know you said you have therapy, how else do you now manage and take care of your own mental well-being and your own self-care? What is it that you do?
I have a kind of mental list. I used to actually have a physical list, years ago, but now I have a kind of mental list, a kind of checklist, especially if I'm feeling low or if I'm not quite feeling in balance. I think, okay, let me go through my checklist. Have I had my vitamin D? Have I been out in the fresh air? Have I done some exercise? Have I talked to a friend? Have I spoken to my therapist if I'm seeing them at the moment? Have I had time to read my checklist of things that I know keep me healthy? Like, so last night I said, oh, I have to phone a friend.
Yeah.
I need to talk to a friend. I need to just pause and talk to a friend.
Yeah.
And to just, and sometimes I think it's quite good to, I found it quite helpful to just write a little list for myself. Now it's kind of in my head. Because sometimes when you're really, really low, it can be difficult to remind yourself of what you're supposed to do. You can feel really lost. So I go back to that list and go, oh, okay, maybe I need to do this, you know. Yeah, the little checklist.
Yeah. Is there anything you would like to say to our listening audience or our viewers? What would you like to say to them? Thinking about the theme of our mental health as a people, and also about your work. What would you like to say in closing to the audience?
I think, you know, some of that research into family tree in a play like that, it was the hardest research I've ever done, really uncovering, especially looking at gynecology and everything. And it was so hard to realize what our ancestors and what we've been through, and I suppose it can be underestimated, the effect that it has, that history, and it's not just history, it's now too. Like, it can be underestimated what the effect of all of that on us.
Yeah.
And
Intergenerational trauma.
Yeah, it can be really underestimated. And then on the flip side, there's this stereotype of strong Black woman, strong Black man, we're tough. You know, I'll never forget somebody even pulled, one woman even pulled my skin. I put it in family tree, actually, thinking that my skin, literally pulling it, like my skin wouldn't feel it. Like, you know, like, anyway, we know these things. We don't have to repeat all of those things, but we can underestimate the effect that those things have on us. So therefore, it doesn't mean necessarily that we've got to focus on that and kind of think about it. But then I just think in terms of balance, to not underestimate what we need to give ourselves, you know, in terms of rest, relaxation, friendship, playfulness, sexuality, healing, you know, the things that give us joy, the things that give us pleasure, whatever it is, you know, to and that we do not have to be strong.
Yes.
We are strong, but we don't have to be. We don't have to be anybody else's idea of strong. We can be vulnerable. It's taken me so long to learn to cry. Really taken me so long to learn to, because that's not what we do. You know, it's like, get on with it, and to feel that vulnerability is a strength, that we, you know, to not underestimate what it is we need to balance all of that out. And, you know, yeah, I just say, I suppose, to listeners, to give yourself that time.
And I hope from this then that we will all learn to be able to tell our own stories, as the African proverbs. Until we tell our own stories, the tale of the hunt will always be in the hands of the hunter. And talking about family tree, I wore my T-shirt.
I love that. Is that a tree? I love it.
It's a tree.
Oh yeah,
it's
fantastic.
A tree. And
fantastic. Mine is kind of cells, almost like cells.
It's a tree, and I'm going to ask the Mervyn Weir, who's the designer of this, who's also a fellow author, artist, playwright, producer, you name it. I'm going to get you one as a gift to say thank you.
Oh, bless your heart. I'd love that. Thank you so much.
What it says here in talking about family tree, a people without the knowledge of their past history or origin and culture is like a tree without roots.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a Marcus Garvey quote. So I will get you one of these just to say thank you. Mojisola, we could talk. I could sit in your presence and talk for hours. And I know you have a little one waiting. And thank you so much for just being so warm, so welcoming, and for being so vulnerable too in sharing. And you didn't know me, you saw my email, and I'm so thankful for that.
I thank you. It really is a pleasure and an honor always to have the time. It's the greatest gift you can give anybody. Time, and to have the time to sit and talk about the things that inspire me in my life, and to listen to you and to meet you really, really is a blessing. I just want to say one little shout out, because I don't make these things on my own, you know. I'm just one in a big team of people that made these things. So like the Family Tree, big shout out to Matthew Gier, who directed the show, believed in the work, and came up with the idea with me, who directed the work, and all the actors involved, led by Michelle Asante, Actors Touring Company, all of those people that we made that show, put that together and believed in it. We're all part of each other, you know. Everything is everything. We're all interconnected.
And all those awards, those accolades, so well deserved. And, you know, as I watched the play list and heard about your other plays, I think Netflix, Hollywood, why haven't they heard about you?
Bless your heart. Thank you so much.
They heard about you. So anyway, thank you again, and we'll certainly keep in touch.
Excellent.
Wow, what do I say? What a beautiful conversation with Mojisola Adebayo. How gracious she was, and how, you know, willing to share not only about her work or the reasons behind her work, but to talk about her own personal struggles with mental health and how she overcame, and the encouragement that she gives to us all. So in closing, I want to once again thank you, the audience, listening audience, watching audience, for tuning in. And do really take care of your mental health. Make your mental health this year in 2025 your top priority, because there's nothing better than great mental health. And about, as Mojisola said, about being able to tell our own story, whether you tell it to a therapist or you write it in a journal, or find some way of thinking about your own experiences, your own intergenerational trauma that you may be carrying around, and tell your story, acknowledge your story. Take care and see you next time. Hello. As you watch or even listen to this podcast as you go about your daily task, I want to ask you to please like and subscribe to this channel. Not only will your support help us reach more people, but it will help us to get more funding to help with our other community initiatives, which will then enable us to reach more people and encourage them to make their mental health a priority. Thank you again for listening.